Hi, I'm Miss Tidman,
And I'm Mr. Rayfield.
and today we're going to be making a clay dragon.
Let's do this.
Hi there. So the equipment we're coming. Welcome back. So the equipment we're going to use today. First off, we need a cloth. Nice bit of clay. Don't worry, I'm not going to use all of it. I'm going to cut it up. We have a slip, just a bit of warm clay, and some tools. Rolling pin, some bits and bobs. First off, we're going to need to slice this into a third.
Okay, really important things before we get started, kids, is that we need to think about health and safety. So, first of all, clay dust is dangerous. If you breathe it in, then it's not very good for your lungs. So at the end of the lesson, we'll make sure we wipe the tables and we'll make sure everything's clean. Secondly, clay knives. Not that sharp here, but actually they're quite sharp and pointy on the end. So as you're walking around the classroom, you need to make sure that you're facing the knife downwards and you're not walking around like this. Okay, so correct position is like this, or you can cover it with the blade with your hand. So clay dust and clay knives.
Thank you, Ms. Timman, for the safety advice. Okay, right, so chopping up the clay, so as I said, we're going to do it a third. So we're going to just use our eye, I'm going to cut that down nicely. The clay we don't need, we're just going to put to one side. I'm covering the screen, and I'm going to show you how to roll clay. Right, nice and firm. Right, this is good for the tries and the buys for you if you really want to know how to work out. So I'm pushing firmly down to the middle. I'm going to do a little bit across here and there. Not rolling too much, just want to even it out. When I'm happy with that, I'm then going to slowly roll it out. Not too hard. Then I'm going to flip it over and get the other side. So you give it an even layer. Okay. Yes, that's how we do it. Nice. Then we flip it over again, just so we're even all the way around. But what you don't want to do, kids, is go too far, so it's not thin, but it has a nice depth to it. Probably about a few millimetres. Let's just have a look, check the template. I'm happy with that. So, after you've rolled it out firmly, okay, you're happy with that, you're going to get your dragon template, place it on top, then you're going to gently and firmly push it into the clay just to get the indentation, okay? Don't want to be too hard, because you don't want to go through your clay. And then when you're happy with that, get a skewer or a pencil, and then just draw around your template very lightly. Use your other hand as well to hold the template down so it doesn't come off. Remember, there's clay particles, so make sure you don't breathe them in. That's it, nearly there. Any excess clay, just leave to the side, and you can clear up at the end. There we go, nearly there. Magical. Done. Okay, take away your template. Now, you get your knife, make sure, pointing down. Now what I like to do, is when I'm cutting into my clay, I follow the line, but I don't go all the way around. I'll chop off a section here, pull the excess clay away, and just go around my next part. I like to do that, because I've got more control. Because if you go all the way around, you might cut into it accidentally. There we go. Now I'm going to speed up, but you're going to take your time. Nearly there. Just make sure you get into the mouth. And then magical. There we go. And there you have it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rayfield, for cutting the dragon out. I'm going to show you how to do detail. So there are a few different tools that you can use. First tool is the wire loop tool. Now what that will do is it will scrape clay away. I'm going to look back to and refer to my design idea that I did earlier. As you can see in my design idea, there's lots of 3D elements that I want to include in my clay. I'm going to use that as a reference throughout this. Okay, so using my wire loop tool, I'm going to start to actually remove some of the clay, particularly around the eye area where I actually want it to be a little bit indented. So I'm going to remove some of the clay around there. As you can notice, around the nose area there's some indentations there, so I'm going to be removing some of the clay. You've got to be careful you don't go too deep into the clay because you don't want to go all the way through. I've also got the nostril area that I would like to remove clay, and then in some of the fur areas towards the edge beyond the scales. So I'm going to include a few indentations there. What I can do with my finger is now push into the clay to indent the areas using my finger around those different areas. Okay, once I've done that, I'm going to now actually start to put some scales in. Now there are a few ways to do this. One of the ways is I can use some of the tools. I can use the end of a fork. Using the end of the fork, I can start to push in the different scale details. Now this gives me quite a neat pattern onto my dragon. Okay, if I were to use something that was a little bit larger, such as this tool, it will actually give me a thicker scale area. So you could use different variations of size to actually create a different detailed element. Okay, I can also use a scratchy stick. Okay, with the scratchy stick I can literally draw in the detail. So I'm going to start to draw on where I would like my eye to be. Okay, some of the wispy parts I can draw on too. I can draw on my nostril. Okay, I can start to identify where I want other elements using my scratchy stick. Okay, if I wanted to actually apply extra parts of clay onto my dragon, I need to use a special technique, and that technique is called score and slip. Again, I need to use my knife, okay, and I also need to use some slip, which is just clay and water. Okay, using the knife, I'm going to freehand cut an eyebrow out. You may want to use a template. Okay, once I've cut my eyebrow shape out, which is going to go here, I'm going to score it using the knife. Now I'm just going to put some little lines into my clay piece, and then I'm going to use some of the slip. I'm just going to paint it on. Use your fingers if you want. Place that on the area that I'm sticking it to, around my eye area. Okay, and then I'm going to place the clay on top. You can then smooth this area in if you want to. Okay, I'm removing some of my eye, but that's fine. Okay, and then make sure that it's been applied nicely. Okay, that's the first part of the detail. I'm going to hand over to Mr. Rayfield, who's going to put the second part in.
Thank you, Ms. Timman, for beginning the relief of the dragon. And now I'm going to continue to add stuff. Okay, so already Ms. Timman has added some detail. We have some nice scales. She's raised up the eyebrow. And what I'm going to do now is think about adding some teeth and maybe a horn, and then using these tools I got earlier to create more detail and texture within the dragon. So we start off with the teeth. So I'm just going to measure across where the gum line is and just do a few triangles. And as Ms. Timman said earlier, we're going to do a score and slip process. So I'm going to take out those triangles and just position them at the start, just make sure they go in nicely. Very nice, there we go. And then, as Ms. Timman said earlier, I'm going to do a bit of scoring and slipping. Now what I like to do first is make sure it's all flat and it's scored. This process is probably the lengthiest, but you want to make sure you get it correct, because when it goes in the kiln, if it's not scored and slipped correctly, it will pop off. So take your time. Okay? Now clay is not a quick process, it's all about taking your time. So I'm just scoring now the gum areas, like to be thorough. I always like to use my finger, okay, when we get a bit of slip. Now I'm slipping some of the gum area underneath. I'm going to place the teeth on, so up and above. Ooh, there's me forgetting a bit of slip. See, even teachers forget sometimes. A bit of slip under there. Nice. So I'm just placing those teeth in. There we go. And then going to smooth them in, push them down a little bit hard. And you could even get a tool to get the edges in, just so the clay forms together, nips together, so you know it's nice and secure when it goes in that kiln. And then smooth down, but we can come back to later. and we add detail. Add in more bits. But make sure your clay doesn't get stuck, so you want to smooth at the back as well. Right, and one more thing I'm going to do is I want to raise that eye. So I'm just going to make a ball. So I want that eye to be a bit more lizard-like, fierce. It's looking at me. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so again, that favourite technique we like. Score and slip. Something like that. Score and slip. And place that in. And we can always come back to that. That's looking quite nice. I think we have a guest coming.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rayfield. I can see we've now got a horn and we've now got a three-dimensional eye. At the moment, it's looking a little bit messy. No offence, Mr. Rayfield.
No,
so we need to now start to smooth out our dragon, start to apply the finer details. So, using a sponge, it has to be dampened, but not too much. You don't want it too wet. You need to actually start to smooth out some of the areas. So, for instance, the horn is looking a little bit messy at the moment, so you might wish to smooth that out to make it a little bit neater. Now, I feel that our dragon is lacking a little bit of texture, a little bit of pattern and a little bit of detail. So at this stage, you could start to actually press and indent into the clay. So using these curtain hooks, which I think Mrs. Smith brought in, okay, I am going to actually apply detail to my dragon. All I need to do is press lightly into the dragon and then I can pull that away, and actually that will get me a nice little indentation into there. So it's something that you can do to your dragon to make it look more interesting. Other things that you can do, the eye's looking a little bit like a blob at the moment, so we need to make a little bit more detail in it. So I'm going to actually use a couple of tools here. Firstly, I'm going to create a circle there. Then I'm going to use my scratchy stick to make it look more realistic. I'm quite happy with that. Okay, next thing I need to do is I actually need to start to think about some of these scales that are working around the head. So I could use the same technique earlier, or I could use a different tool. So for instance, I might use the end of a fork. The end of the fork will give you quite a nice scale effect. So if I press into there, almost like a brick pattern, I can start to build up further scales into my work. I'm quite pleased with that.
Looking good, Miss Timmer.
Thank you. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Okay, so during the break, Mr. Rayfield and I have applied more detail to our dragon. We did something called refinement. We looked back at it and we actually thought, wow, I could actually apply more 3D elements to the end of the dragon. So if you can see right here, we've applied more 3D elements. We've also applied more detail to the eye. We've applied a 3D element around the mouth and further indentations into the horn and around this area. It's really important that you look back and you actually apply more detail to your clay. And make sure that you've actually used the sponge to smooth as well. I'm going to take this to the kiln room now, where it will be left to actually go bone dry. After that point, we can then put it into the kiln for the firing. I'm going to put it in now while Mr. Rayfield shows you how to clear up.
Thank you, Miss Timmon, and I think that was a successful piece. So, clear up time. Now you want to make sure any loose bits of clay are collected, okay, because we're going to recycle this. And what I normally do is just stick it in with a slip, and then we're going to chuck that into a bigger container later. It's always very important to wipe down your surface.
Remember the clay dust from earlier?
Clay dust is not our friend.
Not
Any
our friend
equipment we're going to wash up thoroughly in the set, put that to one side, use your cloth to wipe down that table, because there'll be a next lesson coming in, I probably will not be doing clay. Nice and clean. Now all this equipment needs to be cleaned up because the next person would like to use clean equipment. Okay, that's
This is
it.
true.
Anyway,
And the next teacher. Okay.
so always clean up your equipment.
Always clean it up. So using the sink, but your teacher will explain that process to you in a second.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Miss Timon.
I've been Miss Tidman.
I've been Mr. Rayfield,
Thank you very
and this
much.
has been Art Tech.